Hi folks, I'm Jack Kennedy and welcome to Farm Tech Talk, the livestock show. Thanks to our sponsors, MSD Animal Health, FBD, Ornua and Boardbia. In a few moments, I'm going to be joined by Adam Woods to talk all things sucklers. And after that, I'm going to be talked on the dairy side by Aidan Brennan, our dairy editor, and Joan Bombardo, the managing director of Ornua in Spain, to talk about dairy markets and how they are recovering post-COVID restrictions. But first, I'm going to speak to Darren Carty, our sheep and schemes editor, to talk all things sheep. Darren, good to have the chat. And I know I'm getting you in between farms. Just, I suppose, to jump straight into it, the weather is the issue on most sheep farmers' minds, whether you're in the east of the country or the west of the country. First of all, I suppose, what's it like kind of in the west where you're based at the moment?
Yeah, so today, Jack, it's 25, 26 degrees. It's probably, now that's stay in the car, so you can probably take a couple of degrees off that, but we're still definitely at 23, 24 degrees. It's the hottest day we've had so far. Like if I'm looking here or looking around, we haven't really been hit yet to the same extent as farmers in the east. We got a nice dash of rain on Saturday. Now I know we had very strong wind and it was drying a lot as it was falling, but we got a nice dash again on say Sunday night, and we're actually getting good dews at night. Like, so I was out early this morning, and like if you're walking through fields, you'd want Wellingtons on, and I think that's definitely not something that you're seeing, say, in the Midlands or down the east.
No, definitely. I mean, and so as you say, it's not impacting on grass growth yet. The kind of the dry weather, and obviously you got that drop of rain. So it's a different story for sheep farmers in the east of the country.
Oh, definitely. Like it's a massive variation. Like I was talking to a few farmers, say around Castledermot area, down into maybe North Wexford, because I know this, say South Wexford got a nice drop of rain, and even around Kilkenny and up as far as Meath as well. Like one farmer I was talking to last night, William Hutchinson, around Chapel Lizard in Kilkenny, highly stocked farm, and he's actually gone in and weaned off all lambs at 80 days. Because what he's looking at, and I suppose this is the big thing I'd be saying, is that he's looking at the forecast and seeing that there isn't much rain in it for him for maybe 2 3 weeks time, and if he lets ewes and lambs continue to graze grass at the rate that they're doing, well, he'd end up in 2 or 3 weeks with no grass at all. So his sort of position is he's weaned off the lambs, he's put them onto a bit of creep, and he's going to prioritise the best grass that they have for the next few weeks to just buy him a bit of time, hopefully.
And so, what will he do with the ewes, Darren? He's going to lock them up, we'll say, effectively dry them off for a couple of days, and then kind of keep them on a kind of a tight rein after that.
Yeah, keep them on a tight rein, like, and for some fellas, that tight rein might go as far as even supplementing out in the field. That the one good position that we are in from last year is that on most farms there is a bit of fodder left over from last year, or else, as we talked about last week, people have gone in and they've taken, say, bits of cuts, or that there's a bit of hay around, and them ewes will need very little to keep going. Like, they can be put into a bare paddock, and the smallest bit, I suppose, while they're drying off, just to keep them, say, appetite satisfied, is what will work on that. Like, your lambs, I suppose, is the more critical one, and for anyone that's doing this preferably now, and I know there's a huge difference in systems and also in facilities, is that it would be nice if your lambs are eating a bit of creep beforehand, in that it does help to underpin performance once they're weaned off at a bit of a younger age. But look, I wouldn't be one bit worried about going in and weaning lambs 11, 12 weeks of age, because if it means that they're going to get onto grass and even a bit of creep fairly quick, they'll motor on, so they will. Like they won't fall back.
How much creep will them lambs eat, Darren? Kind of, per day, per head, we'll say. Like, what kind of should you be kind of building up towards, we'll say, if you have kind of adequate supplies of grass?
Yeah, so I suppose I used the example maybe of what we did 2 years ago at the drought in Tullamore Farm, and it seemed to work fairly well in that when Sean weaned them off that time, he put the ewes onto a real bare paddock for a couple of weeks. The lambs went onto, he hadn't a huge amount of grass, but what was there was good, and there was a high dry matter in it. So that's another thing we have to take into account. So we started off with 0.3 of a kilo of meal for our ram and ewe lambs, and they were all running together. When we increased that to 0.4, And then we were starting to take some drafts of lambs. And what we were finding is that there was no issue with the ram lambs, but our ewe lambs were starting to get fat at a lighter weight, lighter carcass weight than what we would have liked. And we had lambs going into fours at maybe 18 and a half kilos. So what we did was he separated them out. He built the ram lambs up and he kept them steady somewhere around between 0.35 and 0.45 of a kilo, along with a bit of grass, and that kept him motor along, and he reduced the ewe lambs back to 0.2 of a kilo a meal, and that still kept him ticking along, but it prevented any problems that we were seeing with lambs going over fat. Now, if you're in dire straits altogether, like you can increase the meal up, and look at them lambs. Once lambs get into creep feeding at that sort of an age, they'll easily motor through a kilo a day, Jack, but that's where it starts to get tricky, and that we're all told that, say, the markets are going to be more volatile in the weeks ahead, so you will be just slow going in with high levels of meal in a scenario where you think the lamb prices could be falling. I'd be more trying to conserve what grass I have and feeding that sort of 0.4 or 0.5 of a kilo with it.
I know that sounds good. That sounds good. And I mean, as you say, it depends on the situation on the farm in terms of grass supply. But if those very dry farms are looking at doing something, I think what you just outlined there in terms of your experience in Tullamore farmers, good. Darren, is there a danger that farmers might try to sell lambs before they're actually fit? Like, given the drought situation again, is there a danger that they might pull them too early?
Yeah, we're seeing that a small bit this week. Like a couple of the factory procurement agents would have said to me that they're slowly starting to see it. And like it's one thing pulling a lamb light and having a carcass weight of 17 or 18 kilos. Yes, you're going to be down, say, in regards weight for payment. But the big problem with in a lot of them scenarios is, say, the fat cover. And if you have a lamb that's both light and that's also, say, maybe fat score 1, them lambs are going to be very hard to keep for processors. It's going to really affect presentation, and we're seeing cuts of anywhere from 70 cent up to 90 cent in the extreme cases. But even on some of them lambs that are killing a poor fat score 2, they're being cut maybe where they're underweight and underfleshed. And like what I'd be saying is that, look at, say, the biggest issues so far, Jack, are on farms that are very heavily stocked. In the opposite side of things, we do have farmers that are lightly stocked, and there's also starting to be a bit of demand for store lambs. So, like, I suppose the way to look at it is maybe you have 3 situations, and maybe go through your lambs and see. And like some farmers, they're also taking this approach as well, is that lambs that are maybe thriving on or close to slaughter weight, that they'll up the creep in them, and even if they are creep feeding, say, with even for yours, say, are grazing with them, that they can up it. You have another scenario then, I suppose, where maybe you have lighter lambs, and that they are the ones, I think, that look at, they're a longer term option, and you have to really weigh up and sit down and say, would I be better off selling some of these if the market is good for them, or will I wean them, put them onto grass and some meal together? But like, definitely it's a false economy to send them light, underfleshed ones to the factory.
Okay, the same way that is there in terms of the yos, like if lads were to say tighten up yos and then maybe even kind of maybe trying to sell off yos, is there any link to schemes or anything like that lads should be aware of in terms of selling yos early, we'll say, or pre when they expected to sell them?
Yeah, it's funny that you should say it. I've got about 4 or 5 calls this week on that. And it's just fellas looking just to recap on the sheep welfare scheme. So there's about 18,500 farmers participating in the sheep welfare scheme. I'd say quite a high percentage of farmers that have ewes and lambs. And we've seen a big increase of ewes coming on the market in the last, say, maybe 10 days. And a lot of that is due to weather. It's also due to time of year as well, and that some of them early, say, producers would normally maybe wean off the ewes now, but they're under a bit more pressure to move them quicker. Some of them would have kept the ewes until the replacements in, and like as a requirement for the sheep welfare scheme is you have to keep the same number that you have as your reference number. So just say if I have a reference number of 80 ewes, I have to keep that number for right throughout 2020 to get paid on that, say, number. Now, there is a few options that I have. If I had 2019 born hoggets coming on stream, they also do to add into the calculation. So if I have my same 80 ewes, but if I have 20 replacement hoggets kept, that affords me an opportunity to sell them 20 ewes without going into a shortfall situation. The other option I have is that if I don't have anything coming on stream, well, do I go and try and source 20 hoggets now early? Or the last option is, look, take the beating, sell your 20 ewes, notify the Department of Agriculture and tell them, look, that you're down to 60 ewes, and that's what your payment will be based on for this year. You can increase that back up in subsequent year schemes, but that's what they're saying at the moment. The reason why I say notify the department, if you had an inspection and they found that you had your 60 euros there and you hadn't notified them, they'll double the penalty. So instead of losing 10 euros per head and them 20, you lose 10 euros per head and 40 euros.
Okay, good man. So there are options there. Just while you're on the schemes, the BDGP, the Suckler Cow scheme, is there in terms of numbers again, and the requirement to have 4 and 5 star and kind of 4 and 5 star, having enough of 4 and 5 star animals? Is there anything that farmers should be aware of that's coming up on that job?
Yeah, so there was a bit of movement this week in that. So some farmers would have got a letter there to say they don't have the requirements a few weeks ago, and that would have created a bit of concern and some discussions. But say there was the latest evaluation run took place yesterday. So for any farmer that had their BDGP tissue tag samples in by the 10th of April, they should be included in that evaluation. Now, there might still be some of them that were sent in after the 10th of April that could by chance be included, but you had to have them in by the 10th to secure that you had. So what farmers could be doing is that they might be in a better situation if they just say have heifers coming on board, or if they've cows that previously wasn't genotyped that are now genotyped. So if they go back into the ICBF, say, portal or login, generally for most people it's either your herd identifier or your herd number and a password. If you don't have, say, or can't remember your password, look, there's a link there that it just gives you a number that you can text your name to, and they'll send you out an updated password. If you go into that, go into the report section and click on the eligibility report, it'll bring up the latest animals or your latest report for your farm at that moment in time. And if there is any animals that have been genotyped as part of that evaluation, they'll be included. Now, look, I wouldn't be panicking if farmers hadn't their tissue samples in by the 10th of April and got them in after. Like, there still is time to work on this. The next evaluation one is on the 21st of July. So like, if you're in a good situation, just say if you have a reference number 20 animals, so that means you have to have 24 5-star replacement cows or heifers over 16 months of age on the farm on the 31st of October 2020. You could have more animals that will fill into that, say, evaluation one on the 21st of July. Or also, there's a lot of farmers, and even some of the market managers have said this week, is that they are starting to see maybe a bit of interest in farmers buying them replacement heifers. Now, if a replacement heifer comes in and she's not genotyped, but she has a very good Eurostar rating, you can still purchase her, order a tag for her, get it back to ICBF, and you'll have your evaluation through for the next one. It is a bit more risky than buying a genotyped animal, but look, if they have a very good value and they're from a good, say, bull, this is fairly high in the stars at a high reliability, there's a good chance that figures won't move that much by the next evaluation.
Okay, Darren, I'll leave you on this one. Sunday, the 31st of May, is the deadline for amendments to the BPS. Is there other issues that, again, the next Sunday is the deadline on?
Yeah, so Sunday is quite a bit. So the wild bird cover has to be got in by Sunday. Now, look at Jack, I'd say that 70 to 80% of farmers were well ahead this year with getting the wild bird cover planted. So they were, particularly back my side of the country, because a lot of it might be in more marginal lands by nature. It was never as good a conditions to sow. So I even see a lot of wild bird cover crops around here that are well up at this stage. Some farmers may be in areas that haven't got as much rain or holding off sowing up to last week, but I think a lot of them moved in the last week. I don't think there's too much left to do, but look, it's important just maybe to get it in. On the BPF side, look, it's no harm to just go through and just make sure that you have enough land to activate all your entitlements, and also that everything is above board. There is still a scope after the 31st of May to say correct obvious errors like this. Just say if you had 3.2 hectares was, say, the gross area on a parcel of land, and you put in 4.8 or 5.6, like that's an obvious error, like that you're trying to claim more than what's in it. And they can be corrected as long as, again, it's the same way back to the sheep welfare scheme, that it's not an inspection that highlights it. So I'd be saying to people, look, maybe go in and do a once over just to see that everything is okay.
Darren, look, we'll leave it at that. It's some good advice there in terms of in the fields, in terms of the drought piece, and also on the scheme. So listen, thanks for that, and we'll chat next week again. Right, folks, I'm joined now by our suckler and beef editor, Adam Woods. Adam, I started off by asking Darren about what's kind of happening in the sheep fields. Maybe give us a feel for what's happening in kind of some of the suckler farms you're on this week.
Yeah, look at Jack, silage is in full swing at a lot of them farms. By nature, we'd be a little bit later maybe than the dairy farms towards the end of May, maybe for a cut. You know, for spring calf and suckler cows, you don't need that real high quality stuff. So generally end of May is silage. And look, there's a lot of hay going down in the last couple of days as well. A lot of lads praying for the next few days for no rain, that a lot of dismores has been dusted off, and hay will hopefully be made over the next few days. Grass is still tight, especially in the southeast. Speaking of farmers in the southeast, grass is very tight down there. And they're trying to manage that. Maybe some are weaning autumn calf and cows, tightening up autumn cows, and going in with meal and into the weanlands to try and maybe slow that thing up. I suppose, as we said last week, the worst thing you can do is start running round in a tailspin. Tullamore growth has dropped to 40. We're measuring grass in Tullamore on a weekly basis, so that's down from 70 3 weeks ago, down to 50 the last week, and then 40 in the last 7 days. So demand is 50. So we haven't got that much longer. We'll have to start making decisions. He has a couple of covers around that 2,000 mark, 22, 2,300. You know, really strong grass, you know, up at sort of 12 centimetres, 14 centimetres. We wouldn't be going into that in a normal time. We'd probably take that out as silage bales, and we'd skip it. But at the moment, we're going into them covers because to take them out is going to just leave the thing too short over the short period. So silage has been cut there today. And we'll buy a few days, I suppose, around the headlands. So cows will move in around the headlands. That'll buy us maybe 3 or 4 days. And looking at the long range, whether you're talking maybe rain, maybe weddings a Thursday, as a cavalman again, I'd be shocked for praying for rain, but definitely we need it in Tullamore.
Right, yeah, no, you're right. There is some indication that it might get a little touch colder or wetter later on next week. Okay, so that's the Tullamore job. In terms of, I suppose, the big news story in your side of the house this week was, I suppose, the suspension of the Chinese market for beef, like, and that link to that atypical BSE cow. Can you just maybe give us a feel for, you know, again, what was that BSE case that caused this, and kind of what's the kind of thoughts in terms of resuming back into China?
Yeah, Jack, so we broke this story Wednesday morning. Look, it was sort of expected, I suppose. Last week, we knew of the case that was there. And if we look back to the case in 2017 of atypical BSE, that followed a suspension of exports as well. So it's just to China. Ireland, I suppose, notified China straight away of the atypical case. It's in a suckler cow, 14-year-old, in Feathered in County Tipperary, from a typical suckler herd. I think there's about 80 head in the herd. And the cow had been sick, and she had shown signs, I suppose, over the last, we'll say, 2 months of we'll say, atypical BSE. You know, maybe she had become recumbent and just not well. And the vet had tended to her, but unfortunately the animal died. And it just shows, I suppose, how robust our testing mechanisms are, because within 48 hours of an animal going to a knackery in Ireland, that animal has to be sampled. And we'll say that sample is sent off to an approved laboratory, and the sample comes back. And unfortunately, this animal came back with an atypical case. But it just shows us again how robust our mechanisms are as regards. It's not a case where China have come to us and said, "Well, we're not taking your beef anymore." Ireland notified them. Ireland will now prepare a technical report for the Chinese authorities, and we're expecting a very short period that suspension will last. I suppose what's standing to us this year is demand in China is quite good. They're still, we'll say, recovering from African swine fever, which we'll say depleted their pig meat supplies. There was good demand for beef, and you'd hope maybe that might spur it on a little bit quicker this time. But I know at the very highest level in the Irish government, they're working on it, and hopefully exports will resume. It's becoming a more and more important market. Over the last few years, it's been talked about a lot, that is the sort of the light at the end of the tunnel as regards building on a new market. And look, we need all the markets we can get. And with Brexit, it was definitely thought that, you know, if we can get more beef into China, it's another market. We put 10,000 tonne into China in 2019. in the first quarter of 2020, we put 3,000 tonnes. So if we kept going, we were on par to do 12, 13, 14,000 tonne, which is a very important market. And I suppose that the capacity is there to grow all the time. So hopefully we'll be back there very soon. There was a bonus there available. Some factories were paying a bonus for China. Other factories weren't, for sort of under a 380 carcass, TB free. And I know Foyle Meats and Donegal were given 10 cent there for China eligible cattle, and they had been doing a lot of, we'll say, Chinese, we'll say, exports. Dawn were the number one factory in Ireland for Chinese exports.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned the first quarter in China, and that was probably impacted. You know, the 3,000 tonnes that went in 2020 was probably impacted by COVID restrictions over there with their restaurants and all that closing down. So as you say, it was opening up to be a kind of a relatively good market for the beef side of the house. Adam, on related to that, like I suppose markets and I suppose where they are, factory prices this week, what's happening, what's the movement?
Yeah, for the last 4 or 5 weeks, Jack, we've seen sort of tentative increases there, you know, sort of 5 cent. Look at nothing mad or nothing big in terms of every week, but we're sort of creeping in the right direction. But I guess this is the first week now in a couple of weeks that we've sort of seen maybe a little bit of steadying. And look at once we're steady and once we're not going back, that's important. Cows are under a bit of pressure and cows are probably back maybe 10 cent. But prime beef is still, we'll say, in demand, and factory agents are still very anxious for stock. Whereas 2 weeks ago we were sort of heading maybe for 370, or probably maybe 365, 360 for steers and 365 for heifers. I know retail beef is in big demand, and the amount of cattle that are being killed on a weekly basis that are eligible for the retail shops is quite low. So that's putting in-spec cattle in very good demand. And as I said, factory agents are hungry for them. Across the water in the UK, it's really rocketing, and we're heading for €4, €4.10 over there for beef, which is really, really positive. And you might say, I guess if it was another time, you might say, well, factories are profiteering. Then if we're at sort of 360 plus 20 cent for quality assurance, that's 380. And then your bit of grading or whatever, there's 30 cent there in the difference. But actually in the UK, there's a big drive towards, I suppose, purchasing British beef. And I know the Farmers Union and we'll say the powers that be are encouraging, we'll say, British householders to purchase British beef. So that's why, I guess, you know, it's a bit of Brexit, maybe a bit of looking after your country, and that's why the British beef is motoring on. But it is a case of a rising boat will lift, we'll say a rising tide will lift all boats, because hopefully the Irish price can track that. I don't think it'll ever be up there. Scotland is the same. It's really rocketing on in Scotland as well. So hopefully, you know, the cattle, speaking to agents again this week, the cattle aren't out there to kill. Were quite low. Given that the kill risen by 2,000 head this week, the majority cows, but naturally at this time of the year we tend to get cows coming out anyway, and some people are saying maybe as regards good weather and that, cattle up the country are killing, we'll say, a little bit earlier, and in the southeast of the country maybe people are culling cows a little bit earlier than they would have in other years, so that's leading to a lift in the cow kill.
Okay, so that's the factory side of things. In terms of the marts, and you know, maybe store cattle and grass cattle, I suppose, still coming out, and with a lot of grass in some farms. What's your feel for the mart trade this week?
Yeah, they're pretty good, Jack. I was in a couple of marts this week, and really, I shouldn't say it, but you'd wonder maybe for some of the animals, you know, in terms of, you know, coming close to finish. And look, it tends to be your bigger agents and your bigger factory buyers, maybe they're able to get a little bit more, and that's great to see. But definitely prices are doing very well. You're talking, you know, around €2 a kilo for that sort of 500, 550 kilo animal. And weanlings are in especially good trade. And any grass cattle are still doing really well. We might have seen a bit of steadying on that over the last 2 to 3 weeks, but this week seems to have jumped on again. And the mart trade is going really well. Cows as well. We have a couple of wholesalers there buying for a northern market, and they're very, very active. We'll say something like a cow heifer or a young cow that's heavy and fleshed. They're making very, very good money. And really, I'd be saying to people, farmers at home, if they had a cow in that sort of category, the mart is probably the better place for those cows at the moment rather than go to the factory.
When you said you were in a couple of marts, I presume what you were doing is following, watching and setting up Martbids job. Tell us about kind of Martbids and what's it about and what's the objective of it, I suppose.
So that's it, Jack. I guess who'd have thought it even 6 months ago that we'd be out in marts, you know, facilitating online sales of stock. But that's where COVID-19 has thrown us. I suppose if we go back to 2017, Martbids was developed by the Irish Farmers Journal, and we had, with a number of marts there, we were able to catalogue cattle before sale, so farmers could go in and see what animals are available for that sale on the morning of a sale. Farmers found that really, really useful. And I suppose this was always going to be the next step for Martbids. We had it there a while ago, but there didn't seem to be appetite there. But obviously COVID-19 has changed that. And we had a number of successful sales this week: Central Auctions, Roscrea, Nina Bore, Kilkenny, and we've a number of other marts coming on board next week as well. So yeah, sales they're going really well, and it's a really simple, I suppose, app to use, and that's the important part. Look at call a spade a spade. A lot of our farmers, a lot of our dry stock farmers aren't really young, and we need something that's really, really simple there for them to use. So once you register on your phone, you can bid at home on the laptop, you can bid on the desktop, you can bid on the television, you can bid on your phone. And look, it's just a single button to press. And once you keep pressing that button, that's the most important thing.
Right, I hear you, and I suppose internet is the juice of life, and that as well. That you're not going to get onto your apps or get onto your unless you have good internet and see the streaming that comes from the marts. Like so, yeah. Look at, Adam, thanks for that. You've given us a good update in terms of where we are in the fields, and you've given us an update on the mart and the factory trade. So listen, unless there's anything else, I leave it at that, and we'll maybe chat to you next week. Right, folks, I'm joined now by dairy editor based in Tipperary, Aidan Brennan. Aidan, good to join us. Thanks again. I suppose, look, at the one issue on most farmers' minds is, I suppose, the weather and the impact it's having on grass growth. Give us a flavour for what you're hearing.
Yeah, I suppose, look, soil moisture deficits, Jack, are getting fairly pronounced. If you look at it like that, Dublin is the epicentre of the most severe soil moisture deficits. And the further away you are from Dublin, the less effect it has on you. So most of Cork and Kerry at this stage are actually fine. There's no evidence of the difference in soil moisture deficits compared to normal there are zero. Whereas in Dublin or surrounding counties, you're talking about soil moisture deficits of hitting 70 to 80. And, that's a 40 to 50 millimetre difference compared to normal, which is fairly substantial. And grass growth in those regions is now being seriously affected. And looking at the forecast, with no rain coming, or nothing that we're fairly sure of coming anyway, you'd have to say that it's going to turn into a drought. Hopefully it'll be short-lived and rain will come. But like farmers, you don't want to be. It's a drought. Like the scars of 2018 are still there for a lot of farmers. It was a very expensive time. It was a very worrying time. And I suppose there is a fair degree of anxiety around this time now as well. And but look, you need to be positive about it as well. It's early in the year. It's likely rain is going to come quite soon. But in the meantime, I suppose a plan needs to be put in place in order to how you're going to deal with the deficit. And for me, look, it all depends on how much grass you're growing and what your demand is, and then you need to fill the gap. Obviously, you'll try and reduce the demand as much as possible. And the steps there are removing non-productive stock from the milking platform. If there's silage still closed in the milking platform, I'd cut it straight away or I'd graze it. That will reduce your demand because it increases the area available. And then I suppose after that, then is you'd be looking into putting in supplements, different types of feed.
Yeah, I heard of some farmers in the east that were kind of looking at crops to buy in terms of a kind of a winter forage source or whatever already. So as you say, it's and their seed they're making that decision based on the fact that they think that there's a drought coming down the line. So yeah, but as you said, a lot of the cow country in terms of Kerry, Limerick, up the west coast and back down to Cork is good growing conditions at the moment. So feed, they probably need to maximise feed grown on the farm at the moment, Aidan. Like, would you say in terms of like those that are not in a soil moisture deficit now, they need to be kind of keeping the farm rocking along, so to keep that winter feed in perspective?
Yeah, well, everyone should be trying to grow as much grass as they can because now is the time to capture as much winter feed as you can. I suppose the question is like if you're in those parts of the country, you're looking more at taking out surpluses now in order to improve the quality available to the cows. Whereas if you're in a deficit scenario, you're cutting surpluses just to increase the area available to the cows because you're going to be short in the next few weeks. So that's kind of the main difference there. But in all cases, you're trying to protect, you're trying to ensure that you have enough winter feed. But at the same time, those farmers you mentioned there in the East Coast, they're already making the call that they're going to have to buy some silage or buy other types of feed, because they reckon that they'll be eating into their winter feed in the next few weeks, which is, kind of a scary thought. But the only thing is, you have to say, compared to 2018, there's an awful lot more fodder available. Because when you look back at 2018, the drought itself was bad, but in actual fact, I think it was the spring was worse. and had a greater effect on causing the fodder deficit, because you went in, you had a period where there was no feed available in the country, and then you're heading into a bad drought then, where there was no surplus feed or any kind of feed over and above what the cows are eating being generated. So that was a unique situation. We're now in a place where plenty of feed available. Feed is very cheap for the last few months, and farmers are making a call. Okay, I'm gonna buy this now as an insurance policy. If I don't need it, I can make less next year. But at least it's there for them, and it's okay. It's a bill that needs to be paid, but it's I suppose it gives them a little bit of surety that they're going to have feed supply.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. You're right. But I mean, where I was coming from was maybe that those farmers that are not moisture restricted at the moment, like they could be potentially topping up paddocks with nitrogen, etc., and trying to maybe fill a gap, or make a bit more silage, maybe potentially with it getting dry later on in the summer. Whereas, I mean, is there any point in those farmers in Carlow, Kilkenny, Wexford area putting on maybe nitrogen now? I mean, nitrogen is not limiting. We'll call it that growth at the moment. It's more a soil moisture piece. The kind of way. That's where I was coming from in terms of the eastern farmers.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, I suppose the decisions around fertilizer, I would always say was the fertilizer that you spread the last time, was all of that used up? And in most cases, it probably wasn't, because growth has been slow on some farms for the last couple of weeks. So then you'd probably go out then with half rate this time around. There is still growth there, Jack. We're not next nor near the bad drought of 2018 yet. So the average growth rate in the Leinster region is 55 or 60 kilos per day. I mean, that does use up nitrogen, but it doesn't use up a unit a day. So you're probably saying it's taking up half a unit a day or some variation like that. So if you ordinarily spread 25 units on a round, I'd probably be going out with 15 units this time. And if that doesn't grow as much grass over the next few weeks, then you can stop spreading fertilizer, because that's still there. It's still available when growth does come.
Okay. Good job. That's enough on the grass. In terms of the feed, I see some farmers going from kind of 0, they maybe might have been off meal, and they're going on to 2 or 3 kilos, and I see some of them more of them going to kind of 4 and 5 kilos. I mean, again, how does that play out, we'll say, in terms of, obviously they're trying to reduce or trying to extend the grass that's on the farm as long as they can. But there is probably a danger there that they could go up to 3 and 4 kilos, and they mightn't still extend the grass that's on the farm. The kind of a way, like if they don't, I suppose, restrict it to some extent.
Yeah, I suppose you need to go back a step. I mean, just because your neighbours haven't to put in feed doesn't necessarily mean that you have to put in feed, even if you're next door, because there's different herd demands. Like, he could be stocked higher, she could be stocked higher, or cows could be eating more. Like, there's different things going on in different farms. So that's the first thing to say. It's not universal. Then you need to decide what kind of feed, how much feed you need to put in. And that's dependent then on 3 things. First of all, the amount of feed the amount of grass that's currently available on the farm, and you won't know that unless you go doing a grass walk. So the lowest you need to go to is 500 kilograms per hectare, but the average at the moment is still around 700 kilograms a hectare. So there is scope there for farmers that they can decide that they're going to let the farm cover run down to 500 and then put in feed, which is what a lot of people are actually doing at the moment. The next thing then is how much feed to put in. And that depends on your growth rate versus what the cows are eating per day. So if your growth rate is less than the demand, then you're going to be reducing your farm cover, and you're going to be hitting closer to that 500 kilograms per hectare the whole time. And the difference between the growth and the demand, divide that by your stocking rate, will tell you how much you need to put in per day to each cow in order to stem the flow, I suppose, of decrease in average farm cover. So it's a math sum, but it's very simple when you get your head around it. It takes a little bit of time to get familiar with the numbers and the wording around how to deal with the grass deficit. But it's actually quite simple. So then, depending on how much you need to put in, will determine what type of feed you need. Like, if it's up to 4 or 5 or 6 kilograms that you need to put in order to keep a rotation into 25 days, then I'd say it's probably meal is probably your best bet. But if you need to feed any more than that, it's going to be a combination of probably meal and silage, and ideally the best quality silage you can get into them, because we're still at more or less at peak production, so it's very early to be getting this dry, to be having a grass deficit at this time of year. So you want to be feeding good quality grass, otherwise you're going to have a good quality feed, otherwise you're going to have it's going to affect production.
Good job. No, listen, I leave you on this. In terms of herd health, is there any issues kind of at farm level at the moment the lads need to be considering this week, I suppose, in terms of either young stock or cows? Any big issues?
Yeah, no. From the cows' point of view, there's nothing really nothing going on as such. Look, a few farmers will be looking to dose for worms at some point in the year, but like you're a good bit away from that yet. It's not shouldn't be an issue. That's not until later in the summer. In terms of young stock, yes, you'll have your calves will be needing their first dose around now, depending on their exposure to worms. So you're looking at stomach worms and lungworms. In terms of their exposure to that before you dose them, ideally they'd want to get a good bit of exposure and build up some bit of immunity towards them before you be giving them a dose. So farmers now will, probably the best thing to do, Jack, is to take a few fecal samples and send them away to the lab. You'll get results back in a few days, and it'll tell you whether you need to dose or not. And some farmers will do that, over the next couple of weeks and make a decision then whether they're going to dose or not. The type of dose then, look, it's always a debate whether you should be using a white drench type of a thing or more ivermectin type products. So they're your porons or your injections, which will last longer. But it's a decision that farmers need to make for themselves, I suppose, in consultation with their vets.
Yeah, good man. Okay, and it depends on, says you, where the heifers are going to be or the young stock or where the calves are going to be. If they're 10 miles away, you might be looking at more of a long-acting job. And if they're around the house, you might be able to handle them easier. Listen, Aidan, we'll leave it at that. Thanks for that. And look, we'll be in touch again next week.
No bother. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, plenty happening in the dairy fields. Now, to get a feel for what's happening on the dairy markets, this week I talked to the managing director of Ornua Europe Ingredients, Joan Bombardo from Spain. I started by asking him, about the new state-of-the-art facility that Ornua have in a villa in Spain, following the devastating fire that they had 3 years ago that destroyed the factory.
In November 2017, we suffered a fire that destroyed the whole factory completely, and we managed to rebuild the factory in less than 2 years, which was quite exceptionally. There was a lot of work going on in terms of our contingency plan started after the fire. Teams across the UK and Spain working together, and we managed to keep our customers. We managed to serve our customers from our UK sites. So I suppose we worked as well on the rebuild during that period, obviously, and we came out with a brand new facility, a state-of-the-art facility. We managed to keep our main customers, our partner customers. They stick with us, and I suppose as a business we probably all learned a lot, and people became even much more resilient. So I think all that experience has helped us to I suppose to be able to be flexible, agile, and collaborate even more when needed during this new crisis. So yes, that was a difficult period, but again, through the collaboration across Ornua, and as I said, especially between the UK teams and the Spanish teams, we managed to go back to normality, and with a site that it's as you can imagine, it's 20 years newer than the previous one, so it has much more capability. It has a larger scale, and hopefully, it's going to be. We expect it. It's a great platform for future growth, not only in Spain but internationally.
What, Joan, if I was to ask you, what sets your product or the Irish product apart from other competitors? I mean, what makes it unique? What's its IP? What's its selling factors that make Irish cheese or Ornua cheese or Kerrygold cheese? What makes it different to the rest of those cheese competitors?
Well, I guess obviously in Ingredients Europe, it's the high quality Irish cheese that we use, particularly cheddar and others that we use, and mainly directly into retailers or food service, especially food service and business to business. I suppose I'm not probably gonna extend too much on the great qualities of our branded products and particularly Kerrygold and all the retail brands. But I suppose in our area, what sets us apart is that not only we have high quality cheese or high quality powders coming from from Ireland. It's then also the functionality of those and how we combine them to create functional solutions for our customers, be in the pizza cheese sectors or in the dairy blends.
Joan, last question, because I've taken up enough of your time, in fairness to you. If John Jordan, the boss of Ornua, said that, listen, you had unlimited spending power and you could spend whatever money you liked to make more revenue in the cheese business now. I don't want you buying hotels on the coast of Malaga. But, I mean, if you were to invest in the cheese business for Ornua in the part of the world where you're operating from, what would you do?
Well, to be honest, it's an interesting question, but to be honest, I think the significant investment, 30 million investment that was made in Spain into that pizza cheese market and the capability that is there to expand globally, I think it's probably what I would have done. And to be honest, I'd probably keep investing on the strategy about building as we go and as we need more capability to ensure we can expand every time more into some of the international markets, particularly into LATAM and the Middle East and Africa, where we're very focused. So I think I would ask him to keep investing and keep believing in the strategy that we've laid out, and that hopefully after COVID, we'll go back to deliver the expected results. And I suppose one of the key things we've done through this period is not only mitigating, I suppose the impact, try to mitigate and look after our people and supporting our customers, but what we've also done is kind of do even a deeper dive on our long-term plans or strategy that has allowed us sometimes to think even further and make sure we keep growing and that we keep generating returns from the Irish farmer industry, that at the end of the day are the farmers who own us.
Right, folks, we've come to the end of another busy show on the Farm Tech Talk. Thanks to our contributors, Darren Carthy, Adam Woods and Aidan Brennan, and our guest, Joan Bombardo from Ornua in Spain. Until next week, stay safe and stay farming.